Good evening from Vietnam. Thanks, Professor Zoe, for spending your morning joining our show and share your stories with our global audience. And on behalf of the listeners around the world, thank you.
Thank you, Ha. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And since you haven't been to our country, please accept our invitation. If you and your family decided to, stop by Asia, make sure that go to Vietnam. So you have a new friend, new family waiting. We will take you around town. Okay.
You are so kind. I've been looking forward to coming to Vietnam, and I can't wait to when that happens.
Absolutely, me too. I cannot wait for it to happen. And in our culture, Zoe, it's very honored if we can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the works that you are doing. Could you please do that for us?
Absolutely. My name is Zoe Chance, and I'm a senior lecturer at Yale School of Management, where I teach the school's most popular course. It's called Mastering Influence and Persuasion, and it's about how we can influence other people in ways that feel comfortable on both sides, so that we can collaborate and do great things together. I've written a book on the topic that's called Influence is Your Superpower, and it's coming out in 28 languages, not yet published in Vietnamese, but it will be published in Vietnamese, and definitely I hope I can come when that happens. I'm donating half of my profits from the book to helping out with the climate crisis. So this is the work that I do, and I speak and teach and do advisory work and consulting around the world, hopefully soon Vietnam.
Me too, I hope so too. And Zoe, you have a phenomenal journey that you introduced to us in less than 2 minutes. And that's not fair for our audience. So today we're gonna dive in deeper to understand the aspirations and the journey that takes you to what you are doing today. So let's travel time together, can we?
I love time travel. Let's go.
When I was really young, I wanted to become an astronaut. So flying into the moon seems to be really cool for me. But life didn't give me any chance to do anything close to what I wanted to be. So I want to bring you back to when you were a little girl, and would like to ask you, what was the dream that you had, when you were a little girl about your future?
The first job that I remember really wanting to do was to be an archaeologist. I was older than a little girl, but I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Ah,
I watched these movies, I loved the character, and I wanted to go and have adventures in the jungle, face danger. And I was so passionate about this idea that actually, when I went to college, initially, I was trying to pursue that dream. And I got to go, I dropped out of college for a while, and I invited my anthropology professor to help me plan a trip into the Mayan jungle to stay with this Mayan tribe who had been living in isolation until the 1970s. And I got to go stay with this tribe in the jungle. They mostly didn't speak Spanish at all. They spoke their own Mayan language, but some of the kids spoke Spanish, and I spoke Spanish so we could talk together. And my goal was to collect some folk tales and turn them into books that could be shared around the world, with the proceeds going down to these people because their jungle was getting sold to cattle farmers, and the jungle was disappearing. But the embarrassing thing, first of all, is that I was so ridiculous to imagine that I was going to be able to just be a random college student going down there to be helpful, or Indiana Jones. But I didn't like the rain. It was the rainforest. It rained so much. And then also, like Indiana Jones, I was afraid of snakes.
oh,
And it turned out in this tribe, the leading cause of death was snake bite. And I was just paranoid all the time. And I was walking down the path one day and saw it was a dead snake, but it was a poisonous snake that had been chopped in half by someone it had met with before me. And I just said, I can't do this. And so I left, and I did not become an archaeologist or an anthropologist. But that was my initial dream. Very different from now.
wow. I want to bring you all the way back to when you were to that time when you first had that dream, because at young age we can dream of anything. So why want to become a wild, Indiana Jones version of Joey? What motivates you back then?
I really enjoy adventures and I really enjoy learning. And in fact, Indiana Jones was a professor and a teacher. And at the beginning of one of the movies, I don't remember which one, he's teaching a class and there's a woman in his class who's staring at him and she loves him as his students all love him, and she blinks and every time she closes her eyes you see it says in eyeliner across her eyelids, I love you. And in fact, I became a teacher and a professor. I love teaching. I love my students. I also did love my professors, and I have been married to two different men, one of whom was my professor at MIT, and one of whom was actually my student at Yale, and he is still my current husband. So, in fact, there were these seeds of reality. It was just minus the adventure part and no to the snakes.
So after the no to the snakes, and you go back to the US, right? And how the journey took place back then for you, from forgetting that dream you had when you were young and going to the different directions and become a professor yourself.
Yeah, it wasn't a direct path to becoming a professor from there. And as I mentioned, I had dropped out of school and to have this adventure. But the reason I dropped out of school was that I couldn't pay for it. My family we didn't have a lot of money. We were, I would say, bohemian poor. So my mom was a single mom and she was working a couple of jobs, and we lived in a one-bedroom apartment. She slept on the couch. My sister and I shared the bedroom. And in the US, college is incredibly expensive, as you know, because you're sending your daughter to school in the States. So I kept appealing financial aid, and it wasn't working out, and I took some time off to work. And then I came back to a school where I got financial aid. And growing up in this bohemian family, my mom was a big feminist. Like, I didn't get to play with Barbie dolls, and she's an artist. And I was also very creative. I studied theater and creative writing, and I ended up after college doing theater and film semi-professionally. Like, I did get paid. I taught high school theater, but I wasn't getting paid enough to actually support myself. And I was doing teaching along the way, and I started a business and I failed miserably at it. The business that I failed at, again, related to education and adventure. It was called Learning Adventures. And I had been working at a test prep company, and I was trying to take kids on adventures to go overseas and study for our standardized tests. This is in the US, SATs is, as many listeners know, the thing you have to do to get, and what your daughter has done to get into college. But what I found out in this entrepreneurial journey, first of all, was that I hadn't been careful enough, and I had partnered with somebody who ended up just taking the money and being a total fraud. So that was a disappointment. But also, I didn't know myself well enough to understand the level of risk that I was willing to take, where I found out through talking during the months that I was putting all of this together, talking to students, talking to parents about terrible things that happened to kids on these adventures overseas. Like, my aunt was taking kids on trips to go whitewater rafting for this organization called Outward Bound. And there were two 14-year-old kids who died because if you sniff the glue that they use for the rafts, and you sniff too much of it, you get high, but if you sniff too much of it, you can die. And that happened to these kids on her trips. I was talking to other kids about trips they took to Europe or other places where like kids would get lost. Like, we went to the Louvre and so got lost for 3 days and we didn't find her. Or they would get tattoos on their trips or get pregnant on their trips. And although I was excited about risk-taking and adventure for myself, and I wanted to help people adventure themselves and step out of their comfort zone, I didn't want to ever come back to a parent saying, I'm so sorry, your child has had a life-changing traumatic experience, or I can't even bring your child back to you. And it didn't matter that we had a lot of insurance. I just couldn't personally handle it. I love kids. I love teaching. I love parenting. And I'm someone who wants to create joy and positive experiences, and just never have that conversation with a parent. So I went to business school for entrepreneurship, met all these entrepreneurs who were really having a rough time. And the biggest thing that all these entrepreneurs were struggling with tended to be sales and marketing of their ideas, sometimes pricing of their ideas. And I ended up being interested in learning about sales and marketing. I did some sales, including unglamorous jobs like door-to-door sales and annoying jobs like telemarketing. But then I went to business school and graduated with an MBA from USC, University of Southern California, which at that time had the best entrepreneurship program. But I said, I can't hack this as an entrepreneur. I'm not going to succeed. But I'm interested in the marketing part. I became a brand manager for Barbie, and I managed a $200 million segment of the Barbie brand. And then through the process, because I still love teaching, decided it would be interesting to be a marketing professor. So I went back to school for a PhD, studied decision-making and psychology of marketing and interpersonal influence, and now I research and I teach this stuff at Yale. So that's the long version, where I don't usually tell people the meandering, there was the rainforest, and then there was this failed business that I tried to start, but that's the reality. Usually it sounds more linear.
So the movie Barbie just came out to the theater a few months ago. Did you go back and did you see the movie?
Yes. Have you seen it?
It's not allowed to show in the theater in Vietnam because of the in the movie there's a map in our country, and the map was not correctly follow the guidance of Vietnam authority. So the movie was banned, and we're not able to see it in this part of the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this. What did they do on the map?
Because Vietnam claims that they have two big islands, one in the north and one in the south. But then China also claimed that those two islands belong to China. And then the movie, so if the movie wants to, show in Vietnam, that they have to have those two islands listed under Vietnam's territory. Okay, but the movie Barbie didn't have those two islands listed for Vietnam, so that's why they banned the movie here. And a lot of and the movie almost came to the to theaters, and they banned it a week in advance. So it's a bit lost for a lot of young children wanting to see Barbie, and a lot of people who want to have the Barbie experience, they cannot see it here.
Wow, I didn't know this happened. This is such a huge problem in Hollywood that China has so much economic power over the content that gets produced in Hollywood. And I just hadn't heard this. I just didn't know that this was part of the many scandals going on with this movie. But I'm also really disappointed to hear that this has happened. There's been so much censorship that usually, because of China's economic power, they usually win in the censorship debates with Hollywood content. And many of the content creators in Hollywood, the directors and artists there, of course, the artists don't get to decide. It's the studios who get to decide, right? But the artists are very upset about this stuff. And for any listeners who are interested in comedy and parodies and these kinds of issues, there's an incredible South Park episode. South Park is this very raunchy comedy cartoon. I find it really funny, but it's disgusting. So it's super lowbrow. And what happened was Chinese authorities were trying to censor South Park content, and what the South Park creatives did was they made an episode that's called Banned in China, and they knew that this would be the very last episode, that probably it would not get shown in China. Their show got canceled in China, but they went out with a bang, and the show is about the whole this whole issue, and it's really funny.
Yeah, and I think that my wife and I really enjoy watching South Park when we were in the US also, it's really creative to us also, I think. Really
Yeah,
love
you
George
can
Fox.
find streaming.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
anyway,
Banned in China,
about
right?
Barbie, can I just say one thing about the Barbie movie?
Yes.
If you don't mind, like it's a global phenomenon, but for people who are thinking they would like to go to the movie and they can't, I want to share my perspective from working on the Barbie brand.
Please.
And I have really mixed feelings about the movie. And what happens with the movie is that it's also a parody of itself, and it's very well done, and it's entertaining, and it has a strong feminist message that's very effective. And women see this movie and tend to connect with it because it actually speaks with some of the mixed feelings and mixed messages that we have as women. But what the result of this is that Barbie and Mattel get to deliver the message that they've always wanted to, that Barbie is a feminist brand and it's about girls' empowerment and strong women. But my feeling is that the reality of Barbie is that it's not, in the way that girls play with it, it's not delivering feminist messages. It's a brand that's based on materialism, and it always will be. And Mattel is trying to sell you more toys. It's a business. That's what it does. It's not that there's something wrong with that, but that the reality of the Barbie brand and the idealized version of the Barbie brand are quite different from each other. And so the movie's going to have moms thinking like, oh yeah, Barbie, she's great. Let me buy that for you, for all of my kids. But then the kids are just playing with clothes and having Barbie go shopping and get married. And I've seen probably thousands of girls play with Barbies, and we've done a ton of research with this, and it still remains the way the girls play with Barbies is not in a feminist role model kind of way. So don't worry about missing out on the movie. That's the short version.
And you're an expert on influence also yourself, right? So I want to bring you to the stage, when you attending the PhD program and becoming a full-time professor. And why influence? Why is it to you?
I guess I've been interested in influence since I was a kid, where I was very shy, very quiet, very introverted, and I was a nerd. I would stay in from recess during school and read books, and I didn't know how to relate to people very well. I thought that you can tell how nerdy I was. I had this theory that the reason people would talk over me when I spoke was that my voice was the same frequency as the ambient sounds of the universe. But of course, the reality is that I just spoke very quietly. And so I very intentionally studied and practiced and learned how to be heard and how to connect with people. I did a lot of theater, and I ended up reading a lot about psychology and then watching and observing what it was that people did to have people connect with them, want to be friends or want to do things together, want to work together, want to socialize together. And I practiced this with great intentionality so that by the time I ended up working in sales, I was really good at it and successful in theater. I had learned how to connect with people and have that spark that has them want to say yes before you've actually told them what it is that you're inviting them to do. And this is what I've been studying, teaching people how to do, not just in business, but in their personal life, and to change policies and have people join together on creative projects. That feeling of, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, and I would like to say yes, is what has people then process the facts and the data and the information in the biased way that will lead them to be likely to say yes, rather than the alternative is, two alternatives are, they're processing the information in the biased way based on their own history and their own predilections, preferences, biases that they have by themselves, or worst case scenario is they're processing the information in a biased way because they don't like you, are not interested, you've rubbed them the wrong way, and their gut reaction is negative. So the gut reactions are instantaneous, effortless, and they're always influencing people. So I like to help people try to have those gut reactions be positive so that the cognitive, rational processing that they do is likely to help you instead of hurt you.
Wow. Zoe, allow me to bring you back to in time again, okay? Because I'm interested to know that little girl who was shy, introverted, and try to get out of the comfort zone, try to break that wall, and by learning and improving and to make, to get yourself out of that situation. While a lot of us out there, we say, okay, that's how I was born and that I couldn't change and stuff like that. So what message did you talk to yourself at that age for you to start doing the research on influences and then practicing it for you?
I was just really lonely. I was just really lonely, and I wanted to not be lonely anymore. And I'm still an introvert. So even though I know much better how to make friends and bring people into collaborations and projects and spread great ideas, I didn't change my personality at all. I love reading and spending time by myself and talking with people one-on-one. And I'd love to talk a little bit about behavioral introversion and extroversion, because I think that can be helpful for leaders if we can in a bit. But I was honestly just desperately lonely, and I was also experiencing shame for being lonely. So a combination of loneliness and shame, embarrassment that I didn't have as many friends as I wanted to have, and I would know that other people were getting invited to do things, and I wasn't. I was even embarrassed and ashamed with my parents, and I remember I didn't want my parents to know that I wasn't being invited to do things like other people were, and I remember that sometimes I would pretend to be on the phone with a friend just so that my dad would hear and think that I had more friends than I had. And I also remember when I learned to drive and I was in high school and I would get to borrow a car, there were times that I would pretend that I was going out to a party and I would just go drive around by myself so that my parents would think that I had friends. So I wasn't just a nerd. I was kind of a weirdo and sort of pathological. It's not that everybody hated me. I did have some friends, but I felt a lot of social pain, and the social pain was enough to motivate me to try to get out of it. And the biggest thing that I learned, which started in high school but then has continued throughout my life since then, was that there's a really simple solution for not being invited to do things and socially and in collaborations, which is that you invite other people. So as soon as this shifted to me realizing that I could invite other people to do things, then I went from being an introverted, shy, relatively lonely person to being someone who had the same personality but was perceived as being a leader socially and in other types of extracurricular situations and academic projects, just because I was inviting people. And it turned out that so many of us are kind of shy on the inside, maybe not as pathological as I was, but there are so many people who would love to be invited. And it's like most people are getting invited all the time. So I was into theater, and so I started, rather than auditioning all the time and being, usually you get rejected, but if you're directing a project, then you get to choose other people and invite them. And I started a volunteer club in my high school, and I would be inviting other people to go do volunteer projects. And on the weekends, I would be researching to find out what kinds of events were going on in our town, and then I'd be inviting everybody. I organized a class camping trip and invited everyone in my class. So because I had been lonely, the things that I was inviting people to do were very inclusive, and it was always open to everybody. And so we have people like, the athletes and the popular kids and the theater nerds and the computer nerds and people from different grades and different ages. And it just turned out to go really well. And so that's the spirit that I brought to college and the workplace. And now, even when I had this book come out in 2022, I was very lonely and I was very scared in the process. And so I started a group of people like me who are behavioral scientists publishing books for the world, who are all lonely and scared. And we meet every month and we talk and we help each other. We give each other advice, and it's sort of like a therapy group. Beautiful. In research, I've started a bunch of research groups to bring people together to not be so lonely when we do research. So this is the most helpful thing for me.
So how did you figure out that simple equation, being on the passenger seat but then move into the driver's seat, and then how did you figure it out and change the role you play in the game?
It was just somebody who was in the year ahead of me invited me to direct a play with her. And that was my first time having any kind of leadership role. And it was a service role. And I hadn't understood until then that leaders are in service. I had seen leaders as being the boss and leaders as being the ones with power. But then I got to have the experience that leaders are working so hard to give other people opportunities, working so hard to bring people together and to help other people feel motivated and engaged and have fun and work together and get along. And so that role shifted my vision of leadership, and it changed the assumptions that I had. And I also got to see, wow, there are so many relatively informal leadership roles that we can have. And you don't need to be the president of something, and you don't need to be the boss of something. You can just start a project. You can just invite a group of people, and you can just be somebody reaching out and saying, hey, we have this thing going on in our community. Would you like to be part of it? And I also shifted my perspective on formal versus informal leadership. And I want to brag about my daughter for a second, because I feel so proud that I have helped her have this vision of leadership too, where she is very much more extroverted and has her act together much more than I do, or did at that time, but still more than I do now. And at her school, one of the leadership roles that she took on was to be the head of the waste committee. And she goes to this school where kids are very ambitious and everybody's wanting to take on leadership roles to have a better college application. And she took on the most undesirable leadership role. She goes to a small school where in the dance club that's really fun, they could only recruit 4 people because everybody's trying to take leadership roles. And it's hard to get people to join the thing that you're the leader of. And in the waste committee, she got 19 kids to be part of the waste committee, part of the least desirable club. And they have fun because you show up for the waste committee meetings, and she plays music, and you play Pictionary before you go and do the actual planning of how are we going to deal with the waste. So I feel like if kids can get the mindset early on of being a servant leader, and I feel like my daughter really, really does this. So she felt that dealing with the trash and the food waste at her school is a very helpful way to serve people. And then as a leader, she wants to serve the school by bringing people to the club, and then serve the people on the club by making sure that they have fun. And that it's not something to be proud of to just execute the job, but to bring together a vibrant community to execute the job in a way that's fun and makes it sustainable.
What is her name?
Her name is Ripley. like Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Ripley.
Yeah, and
Yes.
like the Alien movie, if any listeners have seen the Alien movies.
Tell her that we say hello to her, and then tell her that the world is now having another servant leader. We need a lot more servant leaders in the world for sure. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you, huh?
Great. Since you mentioned about the book, I want to congratulate you on that. It's been 18 months, right, since this first launch, and the first question I have for you for that book is, what took you so long to publish it?
Oh my gosh, huh? It took me so long to write it. It took me 6 years to write it. And I would say that a really big piece of delay in writing it was a feeling of imposter syndrome,
Oh.
and the feeling of, who am I to ask people to spend hours and hours of their life to read my words when so many other people have published wonderful books on this topic of influence. There are all these books that I love already, and what could I possibly say that would be important enough to take the valuable time of the great, wonderful, kind, interesting, smart, ambitious people that I would want to speak to? So it was really a struggle psychologically to get over the hurdle of, and I would say it didn't end. The imposter syndrome feeling didn't end. I just worked alongside it, not even worked through it.
And how did you? How did you? Sorry, you were asking something, saying something.
I was just wondering your tone of voice when you said, I was wondering if you could relate to that, and if you ever get that feeling still, or if you've gotten it in the past.
Sometimes, but not always. I think that I'm one of the person that immune with imposter syndrome, I think. So when I set out to do something, then I'll do it, and it doesn't matter, because I also published a few books myself, even though my books really is not something good. Yeah, and I'm not good at writing, but I do it because I want to set an example for my daughter. And then along the way, the latest book that were published was a product between my wife and I. So I invited her onto the journey because we want to, like you say, if we can invite the people onto the journey together, let be the first one to doing it, and then let them see. It's not the end products, matter, but the journey along the way for them to see, the milestones, the achievements, the celebration, the laugh, the pains. It's exciting to me.
What was that process like, partnering with your wife in this way?
Stressful, absolutely, because we have a different type of, different personality, and I'm all over everywhere, and she's the person really organized. So and one person is really on the executions, and one person is really on the ideation stage. So we have to sit together a lot, and then her table next to my table, we put a time on the day, sit next to each other, just to write and then get it done. But I think it's really enjoyable.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
And
much.
I love that motivation that you have to set an example for your child. And I have met so many people who have gotten through whatever the hurdles are that could hold them back. So I shared imposter syndrome as one of mine. You said that it's not good writing, and I haven't read your book, so I don't know that it's true, but I doubt it, since you've continued to write and publish. But you had that feeling of, I'm not a good writer. And to get through that, as long as you have this purpose that's bigger than you, that's pulling you along, it's beautiful to see how people can get past major obstacles when they have this mission.
Thank you. So the secret question I want to ask you, how did you get past that?
I never got past imposter syndrome, but I reframed imposter syndrome in a way that's been very helpful for me. And like you, I don't get it all the time, but opposite from you, I'm very not immune to it. And having had conversations with many, many very successful people in the world who still continue from time to time to feel imposter syndrome, I have realized that when I feel imposter syndrome is when I'm stepping up to do something at a higher level than anything that I've done before. Whatever I've done before, of course I don't feel imposter syndrome. But when I'm doing something that is bigger or more difficult or more public than whatever I've done before, and I get that feeling of like, I've learned to tell myself that feeling of is a sign that you're on that path that you wanted to be on. You're on that path of growth and doing things that are bigger and better than what you've done before. So the feeling itself isn't positive, but the context, now I can construe it as positive, at least intellectually.
Thanks for sharing the practice of reframing. That definitely we have, for whoever facing with that syndrome in life, at work, or whatever the thing they're faced with, they can reframe it differently. Then definitely it's help for them to, get out of that. So for the book, congratulations for being translated and published in 28 different languages. And hopefully the 29 will be in Vietnamese also, so that the people in this...
It's one of the 28.
Huh?
It's one of the 28. It is coming out in Vietnamese. I just don't know the publication date yet.
Ah, really? Let me know. Okay. So on that day, we will, we will share it with our communities here in Vietnam. Congratulations on that. So Zoe, there's many books about influencing, all right, and then you wrote a book about that. So what is that? Who's the audience that you're targeting for this book now?
The main audience for this book are people who are ambitious and want to do great things, but have been reluctant to study and practice the science of interpersonal influence or influence in general, because it seems a little manipulative and greedy. And I have met so many wonderful people in business contexts at schools where I've been, like Yale and Harvard, so ambitious, smart, successful, but it seems like the people who study influence they're greedy and they're power hungry, and they make other people uncomfortable, and we don't like them. So we don't want to be like them because we want people to like us. And what I teach are influence skills and strategies that can give us more influence and power in the world and have other people like us. Wow. So this is what is a different angle for my book than almost all of the books that have been written about influence. There's an exception. I consider my book to be the granddaughter of Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that he wrote in 1938. And he wrote this book in an American context where white men are running everything and doing business in a very collegial kind of old boy network sort of way with each other. And we didn't know very much about the science of influence, and we knew nothing about neuroscience for sure. So my book follows up on many of these themes, and it brings in science and questions of diversity and sharing power and hierarchies and things like this.
Beautiful. In our culture, and then my grandpa always told me the same story like I'm gonna share with you. When I was young, he told me this. Every moment in our life, we're gonna be in front of a path, a road, and on that road there's two paths. One will lead you to do something really, really good. One may lead you to something differently. So influencing, the fine line between influencing and the manipulation and greedy is like on that road. And if you walk one path, you get to be a good influencer, right? You walk differently, then you becoming a manipulator and a greedy. So tell us how to walk in the right way, Zoe.
I think it's very complicated, honestly, because most of us want to do the right thing and we want to take the right path. And what happens is that we are tempted to deceive ourselves and rationalize things that we're doing to say, well, really, I have good intention. So we can tell ourselves, I have good intention, this is why I'm doing the thing, but I don't want to pretend that just having the intention of having good intentions means that we do. Another area of my research has been on self-deception and studying how people can be lying and cheating and then rationalizing to themselves or deceiving themselves to thinking that they really deserve to have those things that they've lied or cheated to get. And I believe that the kind of influence that we can have over other people where they're excited to be part of the things that we're inviting them to do is it's a powerful tool, and it is a kind of dangerous tool for them and for us. So I believe that we need to be constantly questioning ourselves and listening to other people who question us to try to, I believe that we'll diverge from that right path and that we have to just keep trying to come back to it. And also that we should have some tolerance for other people who get off the path a little bit and they do something wrong and want to come back. So I believe in forgiveness. I believe in redemption and constant effort. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, actually, this is a US thing, so why would anybody know? But even in the US, people don't know. Pharmaceutical companies hiring sales representatives very actively and aggressively recruit college cheerleaders. So they go to universities and they recruit the women on the cheerleading team, not just because they tend to be attractive, because what they have been trained in and what they are good at is getting people excited about something. So then these cheerleaders who have been practicing getting people excited about the sport and getting people to cheer, those people, those cheerleaders, are then encouraged to persuade themselves that they're excited about the pharmaceutical drug so that they can get other people excited about it. And this process, all of us who end up in any role of influence are vulnerable to, deceiving ourselves into thinking that we're excited about something that we're not actually excited about.
Yeah. Wow.
Have you experienced that? You've had lots of different experience with having to influence people, but have you ever had to influence people about something that you were not actually deeply in your heart excited about?
Sometimes, and then we have to wear a different kind of hat. But whenever we do that, I did that. Going home, you don't sleep well. I didn't sleep well about that. Yeah. So I hope that people out there don't have to be put onto that situation for sure. And then if they are put onto that situation, they have a good time to reflect, asking a lot of questions, and maybe choose different path to do where they can be more influential in the positive way. Right?
Yeah, and I believe that in the long run, all of us can.
Yeah.
And that there's so many reasons, mostly economic, but other reasons too, that people might end up temporarily in the situation like you're talking about, where you just need to get something done that you're not excited about. And at least I hope we can allow ourselves to recognize that this is the thing that I'm doing now. I don't believe in it, but I have to do it, and it's temporary, and I see what's going on, and I'm going to work toward a path that I feel more comfortable about, that I can go home and sleep better at night.
Yeah. I have another question about the book, and I know this question is not fair for you, okay, but I'm gonna ask it. Okay, if you can pick one chapter in the book that you want to share with our audience, what would that chapter be and why?
By the way, I love your questions, and you ask interesting questions in an interesting way. It makes it really fun. I don't think that this is necessarily the best chapter in the book, But my favorite chapter in the book is a chapter toward the end, and it's chapter 9. It's called Dreaming Bigger and Better. And this chapter tells the story of my husband, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a former student, and the work that he does bringing democracy to the Arab world. He's German, Algerian, and a lot of his work is the majority of his work is in the Middle East. And he ends up using many, many, many of the influence techniques that I wrote about in the book. So this chapter brings it all together. And what he was doing was bringing together a very unlikely team of people across multiple nations to fund and execute the first ever televised presidential debates in the Arab world. And I'm super proud of him. And this is the kind of work that these influence techniques can help us do when we learn and practice how to influence people in a positive way. And what also happens, I teach lots of very, very simple strategies and tactics. While you're starting to do any of these things, it can feel awkward and inauthentic. And so you feel like you're not yourself and it's not comfortable. You're always stepping out of your comfort zone. But everything that you haven't done before feels awkward and uncomfortable. Speaking a new language that you're not totally fluent in is awkward and uncomfortable. You know, we probably don't remember learning how to walk, but I'm sure that's very awkward. Over time, when we practice these influence techniques, eventually what happens is that you're not having to do these things consciously. They come naturally. It's not that there's no effort. It's not entirely effortless, but it feels organic and authentic, and we're connecting with people in a deep and authentic way that has them wanting to say yes to things that might be more ambitious and audacious than you or they could have imagined.
Beautiful, beautiful. And in the world full of noise is like this, you know, it's hard for us to, for people to be concentrating and keep being influential in the positive way. So Zoe, I have one question that my wife and I always ask every speaker who join to our program like this, because we believe in the power of change coming from the good thinking. All right, so if we can think well, then we can plan well and execute well. So over the years, how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think, Zoe?
I try to listen and find something to learn from any conversation, anybody that I meet. And for example, something that sparked my curiosity and attention in this conversation we've been having is that I didn't know about the map and the South China Sea and the islands there and related to the Barbie movie. So after this conversation, I'm going to go read up on it so that when I'm talking about the Barbie movie with other people, which I'm being asked to do, I have this important piece of the context and we can talk about the politics as well. So, and that's not the only thing that I've learned, but that's just an example. I am so conscious of every single person having so much that I could learn from them. And I'm just looking for those opportunities. So thank you for that.
I don't know how to answer to that. So I have two last questions before we end this conversation. All right. And we've been talking about the past, your present. It's not fair we don't talk about the future a little bit. So let's travel to the future. Is there anything that you are working on and that is exciting you want to share with me and the audience so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Oh, thank you. There's some specific projects, but what I'm most excited about is getting to work with a lot of different groups of people who are working on the climate crisis. So I'm working with a nonprofit called 350.org. I work with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, work with the sustainability teams at different companies like Procter & Gamble. And what I'm passionate about doing is helping people, especially frame their messages, frame their communication in a compelling way. And I shared about how I for example, reframed imposter syndrome so that now I'm able to go through it. And I believe that for leaders, studying and practicing framing is the biggest ROI on anything we can do, because it's actually so easy. I shouldn't say it's easy. It's so simple. And when executed, it can take very little time. So you don't have to change your whole logistics. But framing communication is a simple thing we can do. And this is one of the main things that I believe is going to help us shift the direction of the climate so that we can cool our planet off again. And I believe that all of us who are trying to have a good influence can think about, as soon as we have our own needs taken care of, what are the biggest problems in the world? And those biggest problems need so many of us working on them. And we could use our influence skills to bring people together and do those projects.
Thanks for doing that, Zoe. Okay. The last question is about you again. I have a touching moment when I wanted to travel time, if I could, to hug you when you were a little girl who was shy and quiet, not being invited. And I wanted to invite you to whatever that we do, and that I could do with you together back then. So if you can travel time to see you at a very young age, what message would Zoe now talk to Zoe then?
Oh, I just got teary. That's so sweet. That I wish that little girl would know that her dad loved her so much. I didn't feel it all the time. And my dad is visiting me right now, and he's downstairs. Actually, I'm at home. So I'm thinking about my dad, and I love my dad, and we have a great relationship now. But I just didn't know how much he loved me, and I would have loved to know that.
Oh, yes. So after this conversation, please say hello to him. Sorry, I made you cry, but I hope that this is a good cry, okay?
It is. Thank you.
Go stand and hug him, give him a kiss, and tell him that that's a friend, a new friend from Vietnam, also sending his love to you, to your family, and to him also. He's been a wonderful person, raising a wonderful daughter, and your sister too, of course. So who dream big to make impact on a lot of big people in the world. So thank you for doing that. Thanks him for doing that also. Okay.
Thank you so much, Han.
So now you have a new friend. Okay. Come to Vietnam when you have time, and we make sure that you're gonna have a wonderful experience over here.
I would love that.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do too.
Very, very deeply. Thank you, and sweet dreams.
Thank you. Bye-bye.